global freshwater supplies are shared resources. The world's 313 transboundary river basins, or rivers shared by 2 or more countries, cover half the Earth's surface and encompass all or parts of 153 different states. 90% of the planet's people live in countries that share a river with their neighbors. Beneath these rivers, some 600 transboundary aquifers underlie almost every nation in the world. But growing populations and economies, escalating environmental pressures, and unsustainable and inequitable management practices are exerting increasing strains on the world's vital water resources. Potential shortfalls between rising demands and shifting supplies could engender or exacerbate water conflicts among countries or communities contending over the availability, access to, or management of collective water resources. Water diplomacy and peacebuilding initiatives can help to promote cooperation and to prevent, reduce, or peacefully resolve conflicts between countries and communities over shared waters. I'm David Michel, Senior Fellow for Water Security with the Global Food and Water Security Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. You're listening to a 6-part podcast exploring the dynamics of water conflict and the possibilities of water cooperation. This is Hidden Depths. What is water diplomacy? How does it work? Who undertakes water diplomacy and what are its goals?
I would define water diplomacy as a process of building relations around water, different water issues. It's building relations between the people who make decisions, it's building relations between the people who have the expertise, people who can support these processes.
Martina Klimes is advisor for water and peace at the Stockholm International Water Institute in Sweden. She finds that dialogue and discussion hold the key to building the relationships undergirding water diplomacy.
Negotiation is very much about listening, and we need to spend a lot of time talking about different issues to really start listening to each other, to build trust among these countries and different stakeholders from these countries, and to help them arrive at a shared understanding what are the main challenges, and they understand by the different parties to speak the way they speak. And that is a really big breakthrough in the process. And I think that in the long term, that really helps to advance possibilities for different solutions.
Foreign ministries have long worried that sharpening discord over shared waters could threaten international security. In 1988, then Egyptian Foreign Minister Boutros Boutros-Ghali, who later became the United Nations Secretary General, predicted that the next war in the Middle East could be fought over water. Among policymakers and the public, much worry about water conflict and even potential water wars is focused on the possibility of armed international clashes. While still a threat, the record of actual water conflicts, tracked through efforts such as the Pacific Institute's Water Conflict Chronology, reveals that localized conflicts are far more common.
One of the misconceptions sometimes we hear is that water diplomacy applies only to interstate relations. We really see water diplomacy playing out at many different scales, starting with local scale, then going to subnational, national, regional, and we also do have some global water diplomacy processes. So the actors are really ranging from, for example, local communities, community representatives, elderly, different religious leaders. It can be different water managers at different places. It can be mayors, and then it can be different NGOs, agencies, different ministries, different international organizations. We should not forget different donors, different financial institutions.
Water resources serve multiple purposes and multiple users at many different levels. Potential conflicts often spring from the diverging perspectives and priorities among different stakeholders at different scales. Rural farming communities may depend for irrigation on the same aquifers needed by urban utilities to provide city drinking water. A dam built by one country to store water may disrupt supplies to a neighboring country relying on the same river flows to generate hydropower. Klimes says that water itself is often only one among many interconnected factors at play.
You really need to include everybody who can make decisions on these issues and who has the power to implement these decisions. It benefits the process if the actors are diverse. We have to ensure that everyone who has an interest in the given situation or given dispute is represented. Often it's very little about water. It's very much about managing expectations, relations, historical grievances, different other aspects of relations between different stakeholders, because the context matters so much and all this is interconnected. So it's important to have all these perspectives represented, and that's how we make the solutions more sustainable.
To be effective, water diplomacy initiatives must strive to encompass the full range of actors and interests around the shared resource. Klimes emphasizes that water diplomacy is not restricted to diplomats and officials, nor does it always take the shape of formal negotiations, crafting treaties and legal agreements.
Often the word diplomacy can be misleading because we did hear in the past that diplomacy is just a domain for diplomats representing different foreign ministries. But the process is really a way how to establish sustainable relations between different groups of people who have different functions related to water resource in a very broad sense. It doesn't have to be necessary negotiation. It can also be a joint project or joint initiative when we try to arrive at a shared understanding of a certain situation. And that's not really negotiation. Because often in these processes, we see that the different stakeholders in the basin, they have different ideas about what is the main problem in the transboundary river basin or transboundary aquifer. So our mission is to bring them all on the same page. And that is also part of water diplomacy.
Water diplomacy creates opportunities to bring together different stakeholders in different configurations for diverse cooperative objectives. These goals can and often do include negotiations to forge collaborative policies and institutions. But water diplomacy can also pursue joint knowledge development, data exchanges, capacity building, and technical problem solving.
I think one of the advantages of water diplomacy is that it's creating processes for different sets of stakeholders. Because normally when you talk about these different reconciliation processes between countries, when you talk about peacebuilding, you tend to focus on a certain types of actors from countries. Often when we think about peacebuilding, it involves more the political and military representation, for example. But the water diplomacy brings opportunities to bring together people who are engineers, who are technical experts. These types of experts are usually not engaged in the traditional processes related to building relations between very different sets of actors, that you don't have these platforms in the other settings. When you only focus on political issues, it's very charged, it's very loaded. You are opening opportunities for strengthening relations between different groups and different countries by opening it to a whole new group of actors, which I think it's very beneficial.
Initiating such integrative water diplomacy can be difficult. Communities embroiled in water-related conflicts often lack the resources and capacities to effectively identify and engage in collaborative pathways. For many aquifers and river basins, for example, stakeholders lack full and accurate data about shared water resources and uses. Who is withdrawing water? From which sources? How much? When? And for what purposes? The absence of reliable information shared across all involved parties can fuel suspicion and mistrust, undermining constructive dialogue and negotiation.
How we use information, how we spread information, that's also something very new, and that very much affects the negotiation. Because then often these processes are very much affected by public opinion, and the way how public opinion is formed. In many cases, we feel it's often by misinformation, disinformation, and then the negotiators are in a very difficult position when you're so carefully scrutinized by the public opinion that may not have the actual data. What is it that's being shared with the general public? Is it based on these actual data, or is it sometimes maybe driven by different groups who just want to fuel the polarization?
In the modern media environment, water diplomacy increasingly confronts the potential weaponization of information around water resources. Klimes sees parties leveraging misinformation or disseminating disinformation to aggravate water conflict or sabotage water negotiations and cooperation.
The classical definition is that misinformation is something, it's maybe correct information that's just used in a wrong context. And disinformation, it's something that's been on purpose fabricated. We have so many cases, for example, from Ukraine. Disinformation campaigns were coming from Russia that were really advising people not to use water at all in certain districts because it said that the water is not safe. We've also seen that it's been used during different negotiation processes when either different individuals have been targeted by personalized campaign against them, different negotiators who were accused of being agents of the other countries. I think that will become a bigger and bigger issue in the future.
Yet water diplomacy can also help to fill knowledge gaps and information disparities. In some cases, third parties such as NGOs, neighboring countries, or international organizations can help bring conflicting parties and stakeholders together around collective initiatives to strengthen water management capacities.
We do now have new technologies that are really bringing a lot of opportunities. We will, for example, be able to do remote sensing, a lot of monitoring, and it will bring a lot of more information. But the question here is that, is this knowledge or is access to this information and the capacity to be able to use this information? And then we have a lot of countries who are fragile or conflict affected who just don't have the capacity to really take advantage of what is available. And that sometimes we are concerned that this can create a divide. And I think that this is really an opportunity for external actors to be able to support, for example, with capacity development, helping to gain access to new softwares, helping them, with trainings, how to use really the data that are available in public domain.
Where stakeholders disagree on, don't possess, or don't have equal access to information to envision and assess different policy decisions or development scenarios, this can impact their interests. Water diplomacy may be able to leverage knowledge and data tools to foster and inform mutual dialogue and collective knowledge building. Charlie Iceland, director of Freshwater Initiatives with the World Resources Institute, explains how WRI is developing context-specific data and modeling to engage with the national government, regional authorities, and local communities in Ethiopia.
We're working in a basin in southwestern Ethiopia called the Omo-Gibe Basin, and that's a region where there's a lot of potential for hydropower development. And they've constructed 3 dams already, and they're planning up to 3 additional dams there. And there are complaints among poor and vulnerable groups at the bottom of that river basin that they think the operation of these dams, the existence of these dams, are worsening drought risk in the dry period and flood risk in the wet period. And so the first thing that we're trying to do is kind of get them involved in a dialogue of stakeholders that includes the national government of Ethiopia, regional authorities. We are undertaking some local modeling of the management of the hydropower dams and the resulting amounts of flows that would flow in the river as a result of those dam operations under various scenarios. And we're trying to figure out, can Ethiopia produce the electricity that it wants and needs from those dams, but also provide the flows of water that the downstream communities need at the same time?
Crucially, effective water diplomacy can provide opportunities for stakeholders to build mutual foundations for broader cooperation. Beyond addressing specific competing interests or existing points of contention between conflicting parties, water diplomacy can help develop sustained relationships, inclusive institutional connections, and collaborative mechanisms that enable stakeholders to navigate new issues and negotiate new forms of cooperation over time. Julie Snorek, a geographer at Dartmouth College, recounts an example from her research.
Really, it's about creating discourse and dialogue for multiple stakeholders where everyone really has a say and can share perspectives. And I want to bring up a South Africa example, the Uzimbuvu catchment program, where they were bringing together traditional chieftains and NGOs and government leaders and others and having these quarterly meetings to discuss how do we improve the watershed. And it was related to grazing, it was related to runoff, it was related to pollution, et cetera. And over time, with the bringing of those stakeholders together, open discussions, creating transparency, creating relationships between seemingly disparate groups, they were successful in building a collaboration that was functional, where they could exchange ideas, where they could start to share funding, where they could do projects together, really bringing everyone to the table and talking together about the problem and creating kind of a means for continually discussing these issues. That's really what's at stake here.
Water diplomacy, or formal and informal engagements undertaken by state and non-state actors and stakeholders, can constructively shape the context and collective decision-making frameworks for collaborative water resources management. By working to enhance water governance resources and capacities, promote cooperative decision-making processes and inclusive policy institutions, and facilitate peaceful dispute resolution, water diplomacy can contribute to building the environmental and societal resilience to sustainably manage future water resource challenges. For Martina Klimes, water diplomacy initiatives are multifaceted and can follow many pathways, but the objectives are clear.
In a simple way, we could say that water diplomacy, it's a journey to a specific destination, and the destination is established water cooperation. Water diplomacy is the vehicle that will get the parties to this specific destination that they wish.
Water is a vital resource. All humans need clean, fresh water for drinking, cooking, and cleaning. Modern society depends on adequate water supplies for agriculture and industry to generate power, ensure public health, and maintain essential ecosystems. Indispensable, water is also irreplaceable. There are no substitutes for water's most crucial uses. This makes water management inherently complex and often contentious. Competing demands and contending interests surrounding availability, access to, and allocation of water resources can stoke tensions that, combined with other factors, may erupt in violence. History and current events attest that water can be a contributing trigger of conflict, and water systems and water infrastructure can become weapons of war, as well as victims of conflict. Yet history also demonstrates that countries, communities, and consumers cooperate around shared water resources far more often than they clash. Recognizing and emphasizing the benefits of collaboration, the international community included targets for expanding cooperation in the Sustainable Development Goals to ensure sustainable water and sanitation for all. The American humorist Mark Twain is often alleged to have claimed that whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting over. There's no evidence that he ever said this, and there's much evidence that it needn't be true. Used wisely, there's more than enough fresh water on Earth to meet humanity's needs. It's up to all of us, water's users and beneficiaries, to manage this shared resource sustainably and cooperatively. I'm David Michel, Senior Fellow with the Center for Strategic and International Studies Global Food and Water Security Program. To learn more, visit us at csis.org. You've been listening to Hidden Depths. Hidden Depths is an initiative of the Project on Water Security, part of the CSIS Global Food and Water Security Program. Thank you to our guests. Martina Klimes, Advisor for Water and Peace at the Stockholm International Water Institute. Charlie Iceland, Director of Freshwater Initiatives at the World Resources Institute. And Julie Snorek, Geographer at Dartmouth College. Hidden Depths is produced by Sarah Baker, edited with Emma Dodd, and narrated by David Michel.